Hey fellow nerds. Today we'll discuss the general concept of negative feedback. We'll start with negative feedback, then we'll understand what loop gain is, after which we'll learn how negative feedback can give gain stability, bandwidth extension, linearity improvement in circuits. We'll also learn types of amplifiers and build ideal and realistic amplifier models. To understand negative feedback, let us start by taking an amplifier of gain A. Let us say X is the input and Y is the output. To give a feedback, we will take Y through a feedback network. Let's take the gain of the feedback network to be beta. Let's call the output of the feedback network XF. Now, since we want a negative feedback, we will subtract SF from X, which is the input. We have a negative sign over here and a positive sign over here. That means XF is being subtracted from X. The difference of these two signals will be given as the actual input to the amplifier. Let's call it Xi. What we have with us is an amplifier with negative feedback. Feedback is negative because it gets subtracted from the input. I said beta can be taken as the gain of our feedback network. Y is the input that it gets. XF is its output. Output will be gain multiplied by the input. So we can write XF is beta Y. Now the actual input our amplifier gets is Xi. And Xi will be X minus XF. A is the gain of the amplifier. Xi is the input that it gets. Y is the output. So Y will be A multiplied by Xi. But Xi is X minus beta Y. So we can write Y is X minus beta Y multiplied by amplifier gain. That gives us Y is AX minus A beta Y. Let's take this to the other side of the equation and write an expression for Y by X, which is final output divided by original input. We get it to be A by 1 plus beta A. Y is our final output. X is our original input. So Y by X is the final effective gain. We have already learned in op-amp circuits, we call A the open loop gain, Y by X the closed loop gain. So closed loop gain is open loop gain divided by 1 plus beta multiplied by open loop gain. If you remember it, we have also learned beta, which is the gain of the feedback network, is also called the feedback factor. So the conclusion here is simple. Gain gets reduced by 1 plus beta A if a negative feedback is added. Let's take an example. This is a circuit that we have already learned. It is a non-inverting amplifier. Today we'll look at it in a different light. Input will be given at the non-inverting terminal. Let us call it X. Let's call the output Y. Now output will be taken through a voltage divider. Out of that, whatever potential is dropped across R2 is fed back to the negative terminal, giving the circuit a negative feedback. Let's call the feedback signal XF. XF came from here, so the potential here is also XF. Like we have already seen, XF is whatever potential is dropped across R2 of this voltage divider. So XF is Vout divided by R1 plus R2 multiplied by R2. Let's consider this to be a non-ideal op-amp. For a non-ideal op-amp, differential input voltage does not have to be equal to 0. That is, Vin does not have to be equal to the potential over here Vx. In that case, output will be open loop gain of the op-amp multiplied by differential input. Here Vin is X, Vx is Xf, Vout is Y. Let us replace Xf with this. To get the effective final gain, all we have to do is rearrange this equation and write an expression for Y by X. That will be our closed loop gain, and you will get it as AO divided by 1 plus R2 by R1 plus R2 multiplied by AO. Now, if you look at the circuit, the voltage divider is our feedback network. Input to the feedback network is clearly Y. Output of the feedback network is XF. XF is the feedback that later gets subtracted from the input. Now, if you replace V out in this equation with Y, you can see XF is R2 divided by R1 plus R2 multiplied by Y. Output of the feedback network is R2 divided by R1 plus R2 multiplied by the input, which means R2 divided by R1 plus R2 is the gain of the feedback network, which we denote as beta, and we have already named it the feedback factor. Now, if you look at this equation, you can see feedback factor beta is over here. We can write the equation like this. Closed loop gain is open loop gain divided by 1 plus beta times open loop gain. Gain got reduced by 1 plus beta A, just like we expected. In this example, beta or the feedback factor is R2 divided by R1 plus R2. The next concept you have to understand is loop gain. Now, if you think loop gain is the same as closed loop gain, you couldn't be more wrong. Let me explain. Here the input is X. Let us assume we are not giving any input. Let us assume input is grounded. If input is 0, we can say there is no output, Y will be 0. So there is no point in taking Y through a feedback network. Let's remove that connection. Instead, let us assume that the feedback network gets some input Vx. Then output of the feedback network will be Vx multiplied by its gain beta. Beta Vx gets subtracted from the input, which is 0. So Xi in this case will be 0 minus beta Vx or negative beta Vx. This is going into an amplifier of gain A. So the output that we get over here will be minus beta Vx multiplied by A. This means when Vx was given as an input to the feedback network, the final output we got is minus A beta Vx. Remember, no input is involved. Output is negative A beta Vx, so we can write V out by Vx is minus A beta. Vx, which is the input we gave to the loop, gets multiplied by minus A beta. The conclusion we can make from here is this. If a signal goes around the loop, it experiences a gain equal to negative A beta. This is what we call the loop gain. Clearly, this is different from the closed loop gain. It is also different from beta, which is the feedback factor, which is also the gain of the feedback network. Loop gain is the gain experienced by a signal if it goes around the loop. Let us now understand how negative feedback helps gain stability. We have already seen that the open loop gain of the amplifier A is not very stable. A can vary with temperature, process, frequency, load resistance, signal amplitude, and many other factors. Now, when a negative feedback is added, the effective gain becomes A divided by 1 plus beta A. Here, if beta A becomes very much greater than 1, then the denominator 1 plus beta A can be approximated to just beta A. Then closed loop gain will be A divided by beta A. A and A gets cancelled and the gain becomes 1 by beta, which is just the reciprocal of our feedback factor. Clearly, it is independent of the open loop gain of our amplifier. So even if A varies with all these factors, the closed loop gain will still be constant. You might still wonder in a practical scenario how much is the closed loop gain independent of the open loop gain. To demonstrate that, let me take you to a question. A circuit is designed for a gain of 4. We have to determine the actual gain if the open loop gain is 1000 and if the open loop gain is 500. Now, by actual gain, we mean the effective gain after feedback is given, which is the closed loop gain. But before that, let us understand what it means by a circuit is designed for a gain of 4. It means ideally the closed loop gain of this circuit should be 4. Ideally, closed loop gain is 1 by feedback factor, which is R1 plus R2 by R2 in this special case, which we can write as R1 by R2 plus 1. According to the question, this should be equal to 4. That means R1 by R2 should be equal to 3. So to design a circuit whose gain is 4, all you have to do is take two resistances R1 and R2 whose ratio is equal to 3. But gain is 1 by beta only if one condition is satisfied. Beta A should be very much greater than 1. In the first case, A is 1000 1 by beta should be 4. That means beta is 0.25. A beta is 0.25 multiplied by 1000. We cannot say it is very much greater than 1. When A is 500, it will be even smaller. So we have to use this equation to find the actual gain. A by 1 plus beta A. We cannot assume 1 plus beta A is approximately equal to beta A because beta A is not very much greater than 1. Let's take the first case where A is 1000. Giving the values, we get the closed loop gain and it is 3.984. It is not exactly 4 as we designed the circuit for, but still it is very close. Let's take the second case. Give 500 as the value of A. That gives us the actual gain of the circuit 3.968. Again, this is not exactly 4, but it is very close. Now we'll do one thing. Let us find the percentage change in the closed loop gain when open loop gain went from 1000 to 500. The percentage change will be 3.984 minus 3.968 divided by 3.984 multiplied by 100%, and this comes out to be 0.4%. Did you get it? Open loop gain went from 1000 to 500. That is a 50% change. How much did the closed loop gain change? Just 0.4%. This shows us how stable a negative feedback makes the gain. This is called gain desensitization. Gain has become so much less sensitive to factors that affect open loop gain. Any factor that affects the open loop gain has very less effect on the closed loop gain. Let us now understand how negative feedback will help an amplifier to extend its bandwidth. For that, let us take an amplifier whose gain as a function of frequency is given by A by 1 plus J 2 pi f RC. Gain as a function of frequency is given by this expression. We have already dealt with amplifiers like this. We had figured out that 2 pi RC would be reciprocal of its cutoff frequency, which means gain as a function of frequency can be written as A by 1 plus J f by Fc, Fc being 1 by 2 pi RC. Now, let us find out the new gain when negative feedback is provided to an amplifier like this. We already know that with feedback, gain becomes original gain divided by 1 plus beta times original gain. Here, this is the original gain as a function of frequency. A is the maximum gain, F is the frequency of the input signal, Fc is the cutoff frequency of the amplifier. Let's replace AF with this expression. Now let us multiply the numerator and the denominator with 1 plus Jf by Fc. We get this. Now I want to divide the numerator and denominator with 1 plus beta A. Numerator will become A divided by 1 plus beta A. 1 plus beta A divided by 1 plus beta A becomes 1. Jf by Fc divided by 1 plus beta A becomes J F divided by Fc multiplied by 1 plus beta A. This is what we get. It might not look like it in the first stance, but this is actually very similar to the original expression for gain as a function of frequency. Two changes have happened. A became A divided by 1 plus beta A. Fc became Fc multiplied by 1 plus beta A. So with feedback, closed loop gain becomes open loop gain divided by 1 plus beta times open loop gain. What happens to the bandwidth? It gets multiplied by the same factor 1 plus beta A. There is one thing you can see here. If you take the product of the closed loop gain and the closed loop bandwidth, 1 plus beta A will get cancelled and the product will be equal to AFC, which is the product of open loop gain and open loop bandwidth. This is not surprising to us at all because we have already learned gain bandwidth product is a constant. In fact, we also know that this constant is equal to the unity gain frequency. So forget all that. The point is, when negative feedback was added, bandwidth got multiplied by a factor 1 plus beta A, which means negative feedback helps in bandwidth extension in an amplifier. Let's visualize this using a graph. I have plotted gain of an amplifier as a function of frequency For very low frequencies, it is almost constant and then it starts decreasing. Maximum gain is AO. We know cutoff frequency is the frequency of the input at which gain becomes 1 by root 2 times that of the maximum. Let us plot cutoff frequency. Now, when I add a negative feedback, gain will decrease by a factor 1 plus beta A. The new frequency response will look like this. The new maximum gain is AC. What will be the new cutoff frequency? Again, cutoff frequency is the frequency at which gain becomes 1 by root 2 times of the maximum. Here the maximum is AC. Let's plot the frequency at which gain becomes AC divided by root 2. Clearly, cutoff frequency increased. Initially, we had almost constant gain between 0 and FCO. So our bandwidth was FCO minus 0, which is FCO. Now we have almost constant gain between 0 and FCC. Clearly FCC is greater than FCO. New bandwidth of the amplifier is FCC minus 0, which is FCC, which is clearly higher than the previous one. The next thing we have to understand is how negative feedback helps in linearity improvement for an amplifier. For that, let us take a graph with input on the x-axis and output on the y-axis. If we plot this for an open loop amplifier, it will look like this. Let's take 2 points x1 and x2. Let us see the slope of the graph at these 2 points. Why slope? Because the graph is V out versus V in. Slope will give us the gain. Let's call the gain at x1 A1 and the gain at x2 A2. Clearly A1 seems to be much higher than A2. Now, if we plot the same graph for a closed loop amplifier, it will look like this. Let us see the slope of this graph also at x1 and x2. The difference is much smaller when compared with the difference of A1 and A2. We have actually seen this in the example we solved before. When open loop gain changed from 1000 to 500, which is a 50% change, closed loop gain only changed 0.4%, which means the graph becomes more linear. Or we can say that with a negative feedback loop, gain becomes more uniform for different input signal levels. With this, let us end the discussion on properties of negative feedback and move on to learning different types of amplifiers. Till now, we have only discussed one type of amplifier, one that has a voltage as an input and a voltage as an output, one that senses a voltage and returns a voltage. It looks like this. We call it a voltage amplifier. Here the gain will be V out divided by V in. It is a voltage divided by another voltage and it will be dimensionless. Let's call it A naught. We can also have an amplifier with a current as its input and a voltage as its output. An amplifier that senses current and returns a voltage. It will look like this. Here the gain will be V out divided by I in. It is voltage divided by current. It will have the dimensions of a resistance, or in general we can say impedance. Let's call the gain R naught. Such an amplifier will be called a trans-impedance amplifier. A third kind of amplifier we can have is one with a voltage as its input and current as its output. An amplifier that senses voltage and returns current. It will look like this. Here the gain will be output current divided by input voltage. Current divided by voltage. It will have the dimensions of conductance. So we will call this a transconductance amplifier and we can denote the gain as GM. The last kind of amplifier we can have is one that senses current and returns current. It will look like this. We'll call this a current amplifier. Here gain will be I out divided by I in. Just like the voltage amplifier, gain will be dimensionless. We can call it AI. Let us now try to predict the ideal input and output impedances of all these 4 amplifiers. But before we do that, you have to agree with me on something. That this is what basically all these amplifiers do. On the input side, they either sense a voltage or sense a current. On the output side, they either produce a current or a voltage. On the input side, they act as a voltage sensor or a current sensor. On the output side, they act as a voltage source or a current source. Let's start with the first one, sensing voltage. I'll take a resistor who has some potential dropped across it. How do I sense it? I'll use a voltmeter. A voltmeter is always to be connected in parallel to the resistor. This is the resistance of the voltmeter. Now, ideally, what should this resistance be? Let us see. Some current must be flowing through R. That is how R has some potential across it. Out of that current, ideally, nothing should flow through our voltmeter. Why? Because if some part of this current flows through this resistance, then some of this potential will be dropped across this resistance. So none of this current should flow through our voltmeter, which means resistance of the voltmeter should be infinite. Resistance of a system that senses voltage should be infinite. Let's take the second case, sensing current. I have a resistor R through which a current I is flowing. I want to measure it. Obviously, I will use an ammeter. An ammeter is to be connected in series with the resistance. What we can see over here is the resistance of our ammeter. Ideally, what should be it? Basically, ammeter is a device used to measure the current. We do not want ammeter to affect the working of the circuit. Here, the current through R has to flow through the ammeter, and it will flow through the internal resistance of the ammeter, which means some voltage will be dropped across the ammeter, which is something we do not want to happen because we do not want connecting an ammeter to alter the working of the circuit, which means resistance of the ammeter should be equal to 0, so that when the current flows through the ammeter, none of the potential will be dropped over here because there is no resistance. So a system that senses current should have an internal resistance 0. Let's take the third case, returning voltage. What returns a voltage? A voltage source. Let's take a voltage source and connect a resistance across it. The source is now giving voltage to the resistance R. What we have over here is the resistance of the voltage source. Ideally, what should be it? Think of it this way. We are applying a potential. Assuming it is V, we want all of V to drop across R. But if the voltage source has some internal resistance, some of V will be dropped across the voltage source itself, and only whatever is left will go to R. So ideally, the internal resistance should be equal to 0. A system that returns voltage should have 0 internal resistance. Let's take the fourth and final case, returning current. For that, let us take a current source. I'll apply it across a resistance R. What we have over here is the internal resistance of the current source. Ideally, what should be its value? Current source provides some current. According to this model, some of the current will flow through this resistance and the rest will flow through our resistance R. But ideally, we want all of the current to flow through R only, not through the internal resistance. That means the internal resistance of the source should be infinite. So 0 current will flow through here. All of the current provided by the source will flow through R, which means a system that returns current should have an internal resistance of infinite value. Now, before we move on, I don't know if you have this question in your mind, but I do. Why is internal resistance always in series when it comes to voltage source and in parallel when it comes to a current source? It's actually quite simple. Let us consider that there is a voltage source with some parallel resistance like this. Connect this to a load resistor. Does the internal resistance affect the performance of our voltage source in any way? No, because even with the presence of R over here, the load resistor gets all the potential drop it is supposed to get. So even if there is resistances parallel to the voltage source, it won't affect its performance. Only the ones in series will affect it. That is why we only consider those. The same way, let us take a current source which has some internal resistance in series to it. Does the presence of R over here affect our load resistance in any way? No, because the same current will flow through both of them. the load resistance R will get exactly the same current that it is supposed to be. Only when there is some internal resistance in parallel with the source will the performance be affected. That is why we only consider them. Let's apply that over here. Take voltage amplifier. It senses voltage at the input. Ideal input impedance should be infinite. It returns voltage at the output. Ideal output impedance should be 0. Take transimpedance amplifier. It senses current at the input. So ideal input impedance should be 0. It returns voltage at the output. So ideal output impedance should be 0. Take transconductance amplifier. It senses voltage at the input. So ideal input impedance should be infinite. It returns current at the output. So ideal output impedance is also infinite. Now take current amplifier. It senses current at the input. Ideal input impedance will be 0. It returns current at the output. So ideal output impedance is infinite. So these are the 4 amplifiers that we have to deal with. Let us now make their models. First, we'll take the ideal cases where all these amplifiers have 0 or infinite input and output impedances as required. Let's take the first case, voltage amplifier. Input is a voltage, output is a voltage. We can model it like this. We called the gain of a voltage amplifier AO. So here output will be AO multiplied by input. Let us check if this actually has infinite input impedance and 0 output impedance. To check the input impedance, we first have to apply a potential Vx over here and find its relation with the current Ix that will flow like this. Here Ix will be 0 because the circuit is open over here. There is no path for Ix to flow. If Ix is 0, the input impedance given by Vx by Ix will become infinite. We do have infinite input impedance. Let's check the output impedance. For that, the first thing we have to do is ground the input. Now we'll add a potential Vx at the output and find its relation with Ix. Here input is 0, so AOV input will be 0. Clearly there is no resistance across Vx. So Ix will be infinite and Vx by Ix will become 0. Output impedance is 0. So the amplifier has infinite input impedance, because of which it will sense voltages as an ideal voltmeter and will not load any preceding stage. It has 0 output impedance, so it will serve as an ideal voltage source where the output voltage will be gain multiplied by the input voltage. Now let us take the transimpedance amplifier. It senses current and returns voltage. The model will look like this. We called its gain RO. So V out will be RO multiplied by input current. Let us check if this really has 0 input impedance. For that we have to apply a potential Vx over here and find its relation with Ix, the current that will flow like this. This one is actually pretty obvious. Vx directly goes to the ground. There is no resistance in between. So input impedance is 0. Also, since there is no impedance, Ix will be infinite. And if you write Vx by Ix, you will get 0. How about output impedance? The output stage of this amplifier is basically the same as this one. To get output impedance, first you will have to shut down the input. That is, make In equal to 0. Since In is 0, ROIN will become 0. Now, if I apply a potential Vx over here and try to find its relation with the current Ix, clearly Ix will be infinite because this point is directly connected to the ground. There is no resistance across Vx. So Vx by Ix will be 0. We do have 0 output impedance. So a transimpedance amplifier has 0 input impedance, which makes it measure currents like an ideal ammeter. It also has 0 output impedance, which makes it work like an ideal voltage source. The output voltage will be RO multiplied by input current. Let us now take the third amplifier, transconductance amplifier. It senses voltage and returns current. The model will look like this. We called its gain GM. So output will be Gm multiplied by input voltage. Now, does it really have infinite input impedance and zero output impedance? We don't have to analyze the input impedance part because what we have on the input stage is exactly the same as what we have for the voltage amplifier. So input impedance is infinite. Let's check whether this has infinite output impedance. For that, first thing we do is shut down the input. V in becomes 0, which means GMV in becomes 0, which means current flowing through here is 0. So if we apply a potential Vx over here and try to find its relation with the current that flows over here, current will be 0. That means if you take Vx by Ix, you will get infinite value. Output impedance is also infinite. So transconductor amplifier has infinite input impedance that will make it sense voltages like an ideal voltmeter. It also has infinite output impedance, which means it will serve as an ideal current source. Output will be Gm multiplied by input voltage. Let's take the fourth case, current amplifier. It senses current, returns current. The model will look like this. We call its gain AI, so output current will be AI multiplied by input current. Now, does it really have zero input impedance and infinite output impedance? We really don't have to analyze anything. Its input stage is similar to the input stage of a transimpedance amplifier. We already did the analysis and it does have zero input impedance. Its output stage is similar to that of the transconductance amplifier. We did the analysis and it does have infinite output impedance. So we can conclude current amplifier has zero input impedance and it can measure currents just like an ideal ammeter. It has infinite output impedance and it serves as an ideal current source. Output current will be AI multiplied by the input current. Let us now make realistic models of all these four amplifiers. And by that I mean their input sides won't be ideal voltage or current sensors. And their output sides won't be ideal voltage or current sources. And by that I mean their input and output impedances will not be zero or infinite as required. Let us start with a voltage amplifier. On the input side, it is a voltage sensor. Ideally, it has infinite input impedance. In a realistic model, we'll have to add a resistance that is not infinite and affects the performance. Imagine I had some resistance like this. Will it affect the performance? Let's find that out by finding the new input impedance. For that, I'll apply a potential Vx at the input and find its relation with the current Ix that will be flowing over here. Now, what will be Ix? Ix will simply be 0 because the circuit is open over here. If Ix is 0, when I take Vx by Ix to find the new input impedance, I will still get infinity. That means if there is some resistance in the circuit in this manner, it will not affect the performance. So we do not have to consider it in the model. Now imagine I have some resistance like this. I'll apply a potential Vx over here and try to find its relation with the current Ix that will flow like this. Ix will flow through R in. That means Vx is Ix R in, or Vx by Ix, the input impedance, is equal to R in. So this is the right way. On the output side, this is a voltage source. Ideally, it has zero impedance. Practically, it should have some impedance that is affecting the performance. Imagine we had some resistance like this. Will it affect the performance? No, because even if such a resistance exists there, V out is still going to be AOV in. So it doesn't matter. But imagine we have a resistance like this. Now that would be a problem because out of AOV in, some potential will be dropped across R out and only the rest will come out at the output. So this is the right way. Let's take transimpedance amplifier. At the input side, it is a current sensor. It should have zero input impedance ideally. In a practical case, it should have an impedance that is non-zero, which affects the performance. Imagine I have some resistance like this. I'll connect a potential Vx over here, find its relation with the current Ix flowing over here. Ix will flow through R in. So clearly Vx by Ix will be Rin. We have an input impedance that is non-zero. This is the correct way. On the output side, it is again a voltage source. So whatever we did here will apply there also. Let's add an output impedance over here. Let's go to transconductance amplifier. At the input side, it is a voltage sensor. So whatever we did here will be applicable there also. Let's add an input impedance like this. At the output side, it is a current source. If we had some resistance like this, will it affect the performance? No, because in that case also, output current will be still equal to GMV in. Now imagine we have a resistance like this. This will affect our performance. Some of the current will have to flow through this resistance and I out will not be equal to GMV in. This is the correct way. Let's take the current amplifier now. At the input side, it is a current sensor. So whatever we did here will be applicable there. Let's add a resistance over here. At the output side, it is a current source. So whatever we did here will be applicable there. We'll add a resistance like this. Now to make this more generic, we can replace R in and R out in all these models with Z in and Z out, implying the impedance can be resistive or not. That's all about it for today. In the next lecture of this series, we will take all these 4 amplifiers, give them negative feedback and discuss their properties. So see you there. Thank you for watching and please don't forget to subscribe.